A KwaZulu-Natal doctor is in deep water for his response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Shankara Chetty is now being investigated by the Health Professions Council after he spoke out about the risks of the COVID-19 vaccine and alleged medical censorship. He joins me now live here to talk more about this. Dr. Chetty, good afternoon. Welcome to today. First up, let's just start there. Why are you in trouble?
Well, I'm hoping my hearing on the 17th will give me that information as well, then. The council has brought charges against me for unprofessional conduct, but none of the charges seem to make any sense to me right now.
Okay, but my understanding is that's all because you've been highlighting some dangers around COVID-19 vaccine, particularly for children.
Yes, Dan, to give you some perspective on where this comes from, I started seeing patients physically myself in 2020, and I understood the nature of the illness and how it causes death. I quickly understood that we were having an allergic reaction to a protein on the virus rather than any severe viral infection. A majority of patients who had severe illness initially had a viral phase from which they seem to have recovered. And they progressed into a second phase, which was a hypersensitivity-triggered allergic process that led to severe inflammation and coagulation. By examining patients myself, I figured this out, and I started treating it as such, as a biphasic illness. Not everyone goes into the second phase, and so I had to educate patients about watching for that second phase a week later. And over the course of the pandemic, I've treated over 14,000 patients myself. I've educated doctors around the world, thousands of doctors around the world. I've been asked to present to the academic society of my medical college as an expert COVID faculty. And all the doctors around the world have had the same outcomes as I have. No hospitalizations, no deaths, and we've negated the need for oxygen. And so towards the tail end of 2020, I realized that the problem was spike protein. Spike protein was causing the allergic reaction. And so using spike protein in a vaccine seemed a nonsensical thing to do. And I've been speaking out against using new technology with the spike protein as a vaccine would be dangerous. And so I've been speaking out against this from day one. I understand the structure of spike protein and what it would do in the human body. And so I predicted the side effects of the vaccine. And of course, all that has come to bear. Now, if someone falls and bumps their head, you suspect a head injury. That doesn't make that suspicion unlawful and going against mainstream. And my suspicions have all proven to be true. And so a lot of other doctors have advocated for the stopping of this vaccine. Clearly, it was not proven to stop transmission or stop infections, has no population-based benefit.
Is this allergic reaction to this protein? I'm not. You've mentioned the name.
Yes.
Is it also? Does it affect adults as much as it affects children?
Just to put that into context, in the first wave, we found people over 55 that were badly affected by the first variant. Now, that when you have an allergic reaction to something, the first exposure to an allergen doesn't cause a reaction. In those that are allergic, they develop the antibodies. And so the second reaction is what becomes clinically significant. So I was of the opinion that people over 55 were exposed to something that gave them the antibodies. And so when they were re-exposed to the virus in the first wave, they were the ones that were dying. But those below 55 were sensitized in the first wave. And in the second wave, they would have got their second dose. And so I predicted that people, younger patients in the second wave would die. And that's what happened globally, irrespective of variants. Now, when it comes to children, children are generally protected by an immature immune system. And so they can't have very severe allergic reactions. And so children generally were protected. And of course, you cannot vaccinate against an allergic reaction. I think it's time people realized that the virus was not the primary pathogen of COVID illness. It was spike protein. The spike protein was responsible for all the mortality and morbidity we've seen. And with the vaccination, that reaction would result in the differences we see. Some people had no reactions to the vaccine, and some people have had very severe reactions to the vaccine. But in all, a vaccine is not going to give you protection against an allergic reaction. And of course, with robust natural immunity now being acknowledged, There was no need for a vaccine to create that immunity in the first place.
Yeah, I understand you've joined two other applicants, Dr. Chetty, in filing an urgent ex parte application to stop the administration of the COVID-19 shots to children between the ages of 5 and 11 years. Is that why perhaps you are being hauled before an inquiry?
Look, I think I'm in a unique position in that I've seen this pandemic and contributed to the academics around the pandemic from the start through the administration of the vaccines to the point where we are now witnessing the side effects, like I had predicted before the vaccines were even rolled out. Now, children are definitely not going to be protected in any means by this vaccine. They are not at risk. In everything we do, we got to consider and weigh up a risk-benefit ratio. So the risk to children is negligible, if any. So we got to consider the risk of COVID. And so we got to consider the benefits of the vaccine weighed against the risks of the vaccine. And so if the risk to children is negligible, I think a new untested intervention is wholly reckless. Children are not at risk of COVID. And so we can take our time and assess these vaccines and make sure thoroughly that they are safe before we decide to administer it to a population not at risk of illness in the first place.
Where else in the world, Dr. Chetty, your efforts have been recognized?
Well, Dan, I've treated, just recently, I was awarded in Malaysia. I've treated I taught 250 doctors there 2.5 years ago to treat COVID. They all had the same outcomes. They had a gala dinner in my honor. I was also awarded by the Can Survive Society of Malaysia for advising them 2.5 years ago to advise their cancer survivors not to take this vaccine. It would cause a reemergence of their latent cancers. And they saw that happening. Those that took the vaccine had reemergence of their cancers in remission. And so they awarded me for giving them that information that saved more lives than any cancer treatment would have in the last 2 years. I've trained doctors in UK, in India, in Singapore. In fact, there's very few countries around the world I haven't spoken at. I've been called to address the European Union Parliament on early effective treatments. I've addressed the coronavirus grand jury on what is happening and what the agenda is. So yes, I've lectured and I've spoken around the world.
So the South African Health Professionals Council is bringing you into inquiry while your work, and as you've just outlined, is being recognized and you've been awarded for it in places like Malaysia. Why do you think South Africans would be doubtful or questioning what you are doing?
I don't think it's the South Africans that are questioning what I'm doing. I think it's the people in charge of the pandemic itself. We are facing a novel virus causing a very unusual illness. It is new to medical science, so no one is an expert. And I think the frontline doctors who put their lives at risk to treat patients were the ones that would have gained knowledge first in this pandemic, and they should have been considered the true experts of the pandemic. None of the public health authorities that are self-proclaimed experts have ever treated a COVID patient. And so they have absolutely no clue about treatment. Now, as a doctor, when my community faces a health risk, and I put myself out there to assist them, I have my knowledge and I have my understanding of clinical presentation to do my best to take care of my population. And that's what I did. In June 2020, I wrote an article about my findings. This was published in Modern Medicine, a peer-reviewed academic journal in South Africa in August that year, and it went out to 25,000 doctors. This is something that has been taken up by researchers around the world and have been proven to be true. The findings are making a huge difference in the future of the way we practice medicine and the understanding of mast cells and allergy. And so it is going to change the face of medicine. And this is widely acclaimed. And so I think it has come as a shock to both the scientific, research, and medical communities that this case, a truly frivolous case, has been brought against me.
Okay.
I think the Health Professions Council is basically afraid of the truth and playing host to some other parties in this matter.